What makes somebody turn away from God when they've grown up in the church?
Why is it harder to share your faith with your loved ones?
How do I stay comfortable when I experience tension?
How do you accept a no from somebody who means a lot to you?
The conversation we're talking about today, and the guy I'm talking about, is my oldest brother. We grew up in a Christian home. He grew up in the church. As life progressed,
This week on the Reach Podcast. All right. Hey, we're back. Another week on the Reach Podcast, and I'm really excited for my friend Graham Gooley to be here again. And Graham is our area director for Search Ministries in Greenville, South Carolina, a beautiful state, a beautiful city, great guy. We're going to have a good conversation, I think.
we are.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
Okay, let's pick it up, man. We're unpacking a conversation like we do here every week. What's the conversation we're talking about today?
Yeah, so the conversation we're talking about today is it's one I'm looking forward to talking about because I love the guy. And the guy I'm talking about is he's actually my oldest brother. And I actually think he's somebody who would gladly participate in this discussion if he was here. So I want to reference a little bit of his story. He is 5 years older than I am. We grew up in a Christian home. He grew up in the church, professing a faith in Jesus, and really walked that out for a majority of his, childhood, teenage years through, I guess until he was about 33, 34 years old. He just as life progressed, as he, I would say, was privy to more information about God, the church, life, really had a crisis in faith moment. And at this point in the story that I'm going to tell you, in the conversation that we were going to have, there was clarity that he offered in regards to, hey, I don't believe in God anymore. And it was a big disruption in his life and honestly my life as a brother, because we had this shared foundation for so long. To hear that really was, I think, probably shocking for both of us in a number of ways. So
what made that happen for him?
Yeah, so this is where the conversation kind of picks up, because the night that he and I, the conversation we had, and it really was an evening of conversation, I really wanted to know where he was at. Like, what was it that got you to this point of saying you don't believe in God anymore? And I think it was a number of things that really got him to that decision point. One of the main ones that I would say was his reason had more so to do with, I think maybe like an emotional, what we would call an emotional barrier that he hadn't seen before as it relates to people who professed faith and the church specifically. He, at this point in time, he'd just gotten married, and his wife, she's African American, and she just began to share some of her experiences within the church and maybe a larger view of some of the brokenness that we could go on for days about the things that we've seen within the church, the institution of the church. And he, I think, really felt like he'd never heard a lot of what she was saying before, especially in that firsthand experience type of way. For him, he'd kind of grown up in what I would say was kind of a very protected, similar church experience from like one to the next, that it all kind of looked and felt the same to him. And so to hear that different perspective really caused him to reflect on how God is related to this very broken church, and how this broken church, even from a leadership perspective, have let down specific groups of people over time, and specifically within his wife's life, just some really hurtful things that she'd experienced within the church. So that was one of the main things that he said, hey, this definitely added to my current take on faith and religion in the church.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does. Yeah. So, but even to the point where he'd go, I'm not sure I buy into the whole God thing anymore.
Yeah, I'd say that served into that.
Yeah.
So along with that, I think it caused him he had moved out to LA at this point in time. He was East Coast originally, moved out to LA, and out there, compared to where I live in Greenville, South Carolina, there's a whole lot of other takes that are more common in regards to worldviews. And so for him, I think he really was just, he experienced a lot of different ideas that previously he hadn't heard before, and the appeal of science for reasoning and understanding became like a sincere interest for him. And so that night, when he and I were talking, I think he started to lob over some of like what we would say are like the cliche apologetic questions that people would have, like the pain and suffering question. How can there be a loving God in this world with all of the brokenness that I'm seeing?
Only the hardest question ever to answer.
Right. But I think for the first time, he really took it to heart, because he was at a point in time where he wasn't sure where he was at in regards to his faith in God.
Yeah.
And to wrestle with that and give it credence to say like, yeah, where is God in that? And how do I make peace with this when, let's just lob it into the church specifically, I've got a really hard time with that. And now I've got a person that's connected to it in a way like I hadn't heard before. So for him, I think that there was a genuine emotional hurt and frustration that was building.
Hey everybody, I wanted to take a moment and let you know that the Reach podcast is brought to you by Search, a ministry dedicated to sharing Jesus through friendships and conversations for nearly 50 years. Learn more or get involved at searchnational.org. I'm guessing, but was some of this too because maybe he knew the answers to the questions that he was throwing out, and they were maybe superficial, or whatever he thought just wasn't deep enough to explain what he was actually experiencing? Is that any part of this?
Yeah, I think, like I said, we sat over, we were at we had grabbed pizza. I mean, we basically shut down this pizza place sitting outside, talking through, start with that one. Let's go to the pain and suffering to, is the Bible really reliable? The list that we went down, I feel like we worked through all of the questions that Search covers in its content in regards to skepticism of faith. And I think what he said to me at one point in time was, I feel like even within what you do within Search, like apologetics are set up for you to win. And I found that interesting. I mean, we kind of laughed about it because a lot of what we do, we really desire to be as objective as we can about our reason for saying this is the reason, or our reason for saying this is why I'm willing to continue to say I believe that God is still good in the midst of a broken world. And there are deep convictions that we carry as it relates to the objectivity of Scripture, and being able to talk with him about the number of manuscripts and how we look at ancient documents and things like that, that I think he, in some ways, I think people can hear those defenses and they say, yeah, I've heard that before. And I've heard people continue to just use that as almost like a fallback, as if it doesn't fully unpack the depth of the issue that he has with God and religion and faith as a whole. So that's where I say it's kind of this merging of, yeah, I can write your script that you have for, answering these hard questions, but at the same time, here's an experience and an emotional challenge that I've had within the church growing up as I observe my experience and feel like I've been just a part of this, this world that's just had a, really sheltered view of life. I think he felt that as well, almost as if he had never been, like that whole moving out to LA, had never been exposed to a lot of different takes and people who seemed to be relatively content with what it is that they said they believed in. And so at this point in time, we're working through this conversation. I really am trying to listen and understand what he's wrestling through, trying to give responses when I feel like he really does want to hear what I think about it. But then we get to the end of the night, because I realized at some point in time in those kind of conversations, you get a read for the room and a read for the person. And it was a learning moment for me, because 2.5 hours in conversation, it felt a little bit more like, okay, what do you got? What do I got? Let's see how far deep down this rabbit hole we can go. And I kind of had to check my own heart in it to say, okay, I feel like I'm trying to convince my brother to believe what I believe, and like I don't want to lose him. And it kind of disrupts my whole view of like, where is God in this? I don't want to lose my brother. We've shared this foundation forever, but here we are in this moment that I need to actually just kind of release and stop trying to control the situation. So we get back to our house. We'd spent 2.5 hours at this pizza place, get back to my house, and it's just he and I sitting in the car. And this is the question I laid out for him. I said, okay, I want you to imagine, or just go with me in this for a second. What if the God of the Bible that we've been talking about, or that I've been referencing, we've been debating over, what if the God of the Bible is actually who he says that he is? What if that God really is the creator of the universe? And you knew that as a fact, that was true. And this was really the first time in my life I'd heard a response that shocked me and surprised me. Because I asked him, I said, would you submit to that God? Would you submit to his authority? Would you want to come under his idea for the world and creation, your experience of life? And he looked at me, and Gabe said, no, I wouldn't. And I was just, I was very taken back by that, because in my mind, I'm like, well, if all this is true, then why in the world would you not? Right?
Yeah,
This is God, the creator of all things. The picture of love that's been depicted for all your life. Why would you not? And I share that to say there wasn't like some big clarifying reason why. I think that he had problems with God being the authority and him doing things the way that he's going to do it. God doing that. And so later on that night, he and I continued the conversation inside, and like I want to earmark that statement that he made, because it changed some of my views for how I expect people to operate when you think that they're going to respond a certain way and they don't. And in regards to faith, what do we do? How do we respond to it? Because at that point I'm like, well, I don't think there's anything else I can do with this. And we end up, and he kind of gave me clarity though, because we got inside and we're sitting on the couch now, and he was still, I think, processing his thoughts at the time. But the phrase that he said, as he was kind of sharing with me a little bit more of where he stood at that point in time, it may have changed a little bit since then, but he said the statement, I am my own I am. And that I am statement is something that we hear in Scripture. What I would say is Jesus basically making a God claim about himself. And in that moment, I realized that like my brother was trying to make the point that I want to be in control of my life. I want to be God of my own life, and I believe I actually am. And so it was good for me to understand where he was coming from, because one, it allowed me to humbly sit down and realize I can't control where my brother goes with his thoughts on life and God. I can have conversations with him about it, but I obviously can't convince him of it. And so how do I really seek to understand where he's coming from in that? And it gave me a picture of, I think the reality that, whether you can try to answer any emotional issues somebody has in regards to their walk in faith or with God and the church, you name it, intellectual questions, you can try to answer all the most pragmatic, objectively true responses that would help support a choosing of God in that moment. You can do all you can to answer those. But at the end of the day, there really is a spiritual barrier that people have to come into faith. And that's something that I can't control. And it was a moment where I was able to kind of, in some ways it was really sad, because I was like, I can't control the moment.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was able to recognize the best thing I can do at this point in time with my brother is just pray for him, because I'm not going to convince him that he should want God, because at that point in time, he had made a statement for himself and was choosing to stand on the ground that was, I want to be God of my life, and I can't convince him to think otherwise. So it was a really humbling conversation. It was a good one for me to kind of walk through all these different doors and get to the end of it and recognize that my brother just doesn't want God at this point in his life, and I can't control that. And I need to, rather than try to, square peg around hole, I need to pray for my brother and actually just continue to to love, seek to know and understand who he is, how he's thinking, and how he's processing life, and continue to just be a person in his life. And that's where we're at today. And I share that. This was probably 5 years ago, and he and I are still very much in a healthy dialogue about his journey and how he's processing God. And I'm thankful for his willingness to go that far into sharing his understanding of, at that point in time, his understanding of, life and his faith journey and different wounds he had and frustrations. It was a gift to me, and also at the same time allowed me to get to the point of saying, I can't control what somebody thinks or believes. That really is up to God. And the best thing that I can do for him in that moment, based on where he was at, was pray for him. And that really is my main objective in life at this point, is to love him and pray for him and trust that God has to be the one who moves his heart in a different direction.
Yeah. And, there might be some people listening too, Graham, that are going, you had this conversation with your brother? Like, family's the most difficult. That's the most difficult group of people to talk to about these kind of things, are your family, because they know all the bad stuff about you. You grew up together and
right.
all of that. And so, any advice as we're winding up here? Just if somebody's going, okay, I'd love to be able to have that depth of relationship and conversation maybe with my siblings or my parents. What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. And I don't want to make it seem like it's always like rainbows and unicorns when we have these conversations. It wasn't. There's tense moments in it. And I think one thing I'd say is tension is not bad. Like, learning how to sit in the tension with people is, I think, invaluable to relationship, because he and I have, over the years, just recently had a 7-hour car ride, just me and him. And we sat in the tension. And one of the things I said to him as I was listening to understand where he was coming from on another topic, I told him, I said, it's okay that we disagree. And I actually think it's important for us as brothers in relationship to know we can disagree, but still maintain relationship and respect for each other. Yeah. And so I believe if we really do come to the table seeking to understand first for the sake of loving that person, then there really is like a shared participation in sitting in tension, that, like, if you know that person's coming to the table with a desire to really listen and know you, rather than maybe how I started the night with my brother was a little bit more of, I'm going to convince you of something and I so badly want you to believe it. That's actually not after the heart of the person as they would experience it. So I'd say my advice is really be okay with tension, and know that, like, working through that deepens a relationship, and really seek to understand where somebody's coming from for the sake of loving them. Because if they're not understood and then you try to tell them what they need to believe, that's not love. That's just, it really becomes a manipulation pursuit, or one that I just want to be in control. Like, that reveals my cards and my heart in it. So it's a good check to say, how am I listening to the person that's in front of me who believes and thinks differently than I do? Really be patient, really be about hearing and understanding where they're coming from. So
there's a real sense in which the same stuff you do with your neighbor works with your family. I mean, it's the basic same kind of principles. You're wanting to care about them. You're wanting to listen. You are going to be in relationship no matter what they do with some of these ideas, and you treat each other kindly and with respect and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think with family, though, because to your point earlier, you said they know everything about you. He's experienced me in ways that no neighbor's ever experienced me. I think you can get to tension points quicker.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Expect that, because it's like, oh, you're going to tell me that? I've watched you live in this way, so why don't you just, stop talking now? Where you got to be willing to, show your cards and be like, yeah, you're right. Like, that was unkind, and the way I lived here doesn't align with what I've told you I believe. Where sometimes with neighbors, if we're far enough apart, they don't get to see some of those parts of who we are. But with a sibling or with family, with your wife, you name it, tension comes more quickly because you actually know each other better. Yeah. So it's an interesting catch-22 you find yourself in.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So, hey, thank you, seriously, for being here, for sharing. It's a great conversation, and I hope you get to continue having them with your brother in the years ahead.
Yeah, it's been a gift.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the Reach Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. That'd be a good idea. Share it with a friend and leave us a review to help others find the podcast. Now, for more resources, please visit reachothers.org and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and we'd love to hear from you.